Commander Reyes stood on the observation deck of the UEN horizon, watching Earth grow smaller in the view screen. The blue marble that housed humanity's entire history diminished as her ship accelerated toward the designated meeting point with the Senate delegation. She straightened her uniform jacket, conscious that she now represented her entire species. Still thinking about what Vraxen said, Executive Officer Thomas Chen appeared at her side, offering a tablet with the latest reports. Too rapidly for our own safety, Reyes repeated the Alturian's words, as if they get to decide what's safe for us. Chen nodded toward the tablet. The Security Council is divided. Half want to embrace the Senate with open arms, the other half see glorified colonization. And what do you see, XO? Opportunity mixed with danger. Classic first contact scenario. Chen's expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed concern. The technology they're offering could solve Earth's energy crisis overnight. Nothing comes without strings, Reyes murmured, accepting the tablet. Especially not from species that have been playing the galactic game for thousands of years, while we were still figuring out how to make fire. The Horizon's engines hummed as they approached the rendezvous point, a massive Senate diplomatic vessel hanging in space near Jupiter's orbit. Its sleek, crystalline architecture made the human ship look like a crude industrial tool by comparison. As they docked, Reyes felt the subtle shift as artificial gravity transitioned from human standard to the slightly lighter Senate preference. The airlock cycled open to reveal High Counselor Vraxen flanked by representatives from 3 other species, the insectoid Zith, whose compound eyes reflected light in dazzling patterns, the Tellarites, stocky and practical with tusked faces, and the Meverans, whose translucent skin revealed the pulsing of multiple hearts. Commander Reyes, Vraxen extended the uppermost of his 4 arms in what their cultural briefing had explained was a gesture of respected equals. We welcome you aboard the Galactic Confluence. Reyes shook the offered appendage, noting its surprising warmth. Thank you for hosting us, High Counselor. The diplomatic chambers they entered featured a circular table with Earth prominently displayed as a hologram in the center. Reyes recognized the power play immediately. They were literally putting Earth on the table for discussion. We have reviewed your species' history extensively, began the Zith representative, mandibles clicking between words. Your technological progress impresses us. Your social development concerns us. Concerns you how? Reyes kept her tone neutral despite the implied criticism. The Tellarate leaned forward. You still wage war against yourselves. The last Senate species to do so was expelled 3,000 years ago. We're working on it, Chen interjected diplomatically. Vraxen's skin shifted to a soft blue that their briefing had identified as indicating thoughtful consideration. Indeed, but the Senate cannot risk introducing potentially aggressive species into galactic affairs without safeguards. He gestured, and the hologram shifted to display a document labeled Probationary Species Integration Protocol. This outlines the terms by which Earth may join the galactic community, Vraxen explained. Limited technology transfer, restricted travel rights, and Senate oversight of all extraplanetary development for a period of 50 Earth years. Rey scanned the document, her jaw tightening. The terms effectively placed Earth under Senate control while dangling the carrot of eventual full membership. This isn't a partnership, she said finally. It's a protectorate status. It is protection, Vraxen corrected gently. There are species in this galaxy that would see your world as nothing but resources to be harvested. The Senate offers security while you mature. As the implications sank in, distant alarms began to sound throughout the Senate vessel. A Meveran aide rushed in, skin pulsing rapidly with distress. High Counselor, the aide reported urgently. Krill vessels have been detected approaching the Sol system. The emergency command center beneath Geneva hummed with tense activity as representatives from Earth's nations argued over response options. Holographic displays showed the devastation unfolding across the outer colonies. Europa Station's residential ring breached, the Martian science outpost burning, mining operations near Ganymede reduced to floating debris. Commander Reyes stood silently, watching the death toll climb on a secondary display. Every 15 seconds, another name appeared. Another life extinguished while politicians debated. The Krell separatists specifically targeted civilian infrastructure, reported Admiral Kazuto, pointing to damage assessments. Their tactics suggest they're testing our defenses rather than pursuing total destruction. The Alturian ambassador, a junior diplomat named Thalon, observed the proceedings with the characteristic stillness of his species. This is unfortunate, but not unexpected. Krell separatists frequently probe new territories. Probe. Reyes turned sharply. They've killed 300 civilians already. And the Senate deeply regrets these losses, Thalon replied, his skin shifting to a respectful purple. Our peacekeeping fleet has been notified and will arrive to address the situation. In 14 days, Reyes reminded him, her voice dangerously quiet. Admiral Kazuto cleared his throat. We've conducted preliminary analysis of Krell weapon signatures. Their shields operate on modulating frequencies we might be able to disrupt with focused electromagnetic pulses. You propose military action. Thalon's skin flushed red with alarm. That would violate Senate First Contact protocols. Probationary species are explicitly forbidden from engaging Senate-recognized civilizations in combat. Even in self-defense, demanded the Chinese representative. The Senate will handle this situation, Thalon insisted. Further escalation by humans could jeopardize your potential membership. Reyes had heard enough. She stepped away from the table, motioning to her executive officer. Chen followed her to a quiet corner of the command center. I need you to make some calls, she said softly. Captain Mbeki on the Dauntless, Harrison at Sierra's mining operations, Dr. Santiago at the Jupiter Research Collective. Chen's eyes widened slightly. You're assembling a response force. The Senate won't arrive for 2 weeks. We have people dying now. The Security Council won't authorize military action, not with the Senate explicitly warning against it. Reyes checked her secure comm unit. Then we don't ask for authorization. Every mining ship has maneuvering thrusters that can be overclocked. Research vessels carry electromagnetic equipment that can be repurposed. Our actual warships are few, but they're fast. This is career suicide, Chen warned. Possibly actual suicide, given what we know about Krell technology. A message flashed on Reyes's comm. Footage from Europa Station's security feeds. A group of researchers huddled in a sealed laboratory, while Krell boarding parties cut through the door. Among them, she recognized Dr. Eliza Chen. Your sister, Reyes asked quietly. Chen's face hardened. When do we launch? 12 hours later, Reyes stood on the bridge of the UN Dauntless, the Earth's newest and most advanced warship. Around her, a motley fleet assembled. 26 vessels of various sizes and designs, most of them civilian craft with hastily mounted weapons and reinforced hulls. On the main view screen, Captain Mbeki of the Dauntless looked skeptical. Commander, my tactical officer estimates our combined firepower at roughly 17% of the Krell fleet's capacity. We're not trying to match their firepower, Reyes replied. We're bringing something they haven't encountered before. And what's that? Human desperation. Reyes activated the fleet-wide communication channel. All vessels, this is Commander Reyes. What we're about to do violates direct orders and probably several Senate protocols. Anyone who wishes to turn back may do so now without judgment. Not a single ship broke formation. A young ensign approached with a data tablet. The Senate has detected our launch, Commander. They're demanding we stand down immediately. Reyes took the tablet and shut it off without reading the full message. Navigation. Plot course to Europa. Maximum burn. What about the Senate? Captain Mbeki asked. They can court-martial us after we save our people. Reyes settled into the command chair as the fleet accelerated toward Jupiter. If we survive. The human fleet approached Europa under stealth protocols, engines dampened and communications silenced. From the Dauntless's command deck, Rise studied the tactical display showing 16 Krell warships in standard orbital formation around the moon. Their sleek, predatory designs reminded her of deep-sea hunters from Earth's oceans, all smooth lines and deadly efficiency. Krell sensors will detect us in approximately 3 minutes, reported Lieutenant Park at Tactical. Their weapons range exceeds ours by a factor of 2. Then we don't give them 3 minutes, Rise decided. She activated the fleet channel. Execute Operation Thunderclap. All vessels accelerate to attack velocity now. The fleet's engines flared simultaneously as they abandoned stealth for raw speed. The sudden acceleration pressed Rise into her command chair with crushing force. Even with inertial dampeners and acceleration couches, the G-forces approached the limits of human tolerance. Around her, crew members strained to remain conscious, faces distorted by pressure. Krell vessels responding, Park managed through gritted teeth. They're adjusting formation. On the main view screen, the Krell fleet began a textbook defensive maneuver, shifting to present overlapping shield coverage. It was a move Rise had expected and counted on. Mining vessels Bravo through Echo. Deploy your packages, she ordered. 5 converted mining ships released their cargo, hundreds of small canisters that tumbled through space toward the Krell formation. The Krell ignored them, focusing their targeting systems on the approaching human warships instead. Detonation in 5 seconds, counted down Chen from his station. 4, 3, 2, 1. The canisters, filled with a mixture of mining explosives and metallic particulates, detonated in sequence, creating a rapidly expanding cloud of superheated debris directly in the path of the Krell's sensor arrays. The effect was immediate. The precise Krell formation faltered as their ships struggled to maintain sensor contact through the artificial nebula. Now comes the tricky part, Rise murmured. All vessels, execute divergence pattern. Mining Group Alpha, proceed with your drop. The human fleet split into 3 separate attack formations, approaching from different vectors while a specialized mining vessel slipped beneath Europa's surface through a maintenance airlock. The Krell, momentarily blinded and faced with multiple threats, divided their response. The Krell flagship is targeting our communications array, reported Park as the first energy beams lanced out from the largest enemy vessel. Let them, Rise replied calmly. Enact communications blackout now. Throughout the human fleet, all central communications systems shut down simultaneously. To the Krell, it appeared their first strike had successfully decapitated the human command structure. In reality, Rise had prepared her captains for this moment. Now we find out if humans really are as adaptable as we think, she said quietly. What followed shocked the Senate observers monitoring from a safe distance. Instead of falling into disarray without central coordination, each human vessel continued fighting according to predetermined contingencies. Mining ships converted their excavation lasers into crude but effective cutting beams that sliced through Krell hull plating. Research vessels deployed electromagnetic pulse generators that disrupted Krell targeting systems. The actual warships concentrated fire on specific Krell vulnerabilities identified from earlier scans. Beneath Europa's icy surface, explosive charges detonated in sequence, creating massive waterspouts that erupted through the ice at calculated points. The sudden geysers engulfed 3 Krell vessels, flash-freezing sections of their hulls, and creating critical stress fractures. Boarding teams ready, announced Chen. The Krell flagship's shields are fluctuating on their ventral section. Rise rose from her command chair, checking the sidearm at her hip. Time to pay them a personal visit. The assault shuttle launched from the Dauntless's bay, accompanied by 3 others. As they approached the massive Krell flagship, Rise addressed the 20 Marines sharing the cramped compartment with her. The Krell expect us to target their weapons or engines, she explained. Instead, we're going straight for their command center. They fight as a collective. Remove their leadership, and they'll lose coordination. She checked the oxygen level in her combat suit. Once we're aboard, standard breach protocols are useless. We improvise, we adapt, and we do whatever it takes to complete the mission. The shuttle shuddered as Krell point defenses tracked them. A Marine next to Rise muttered a prayer. "They think they know war," Rise said, her voice hardening as the shuttle's breach pods prepared to fire. "Let's show them how humans fight when everything is at stake." The Senate Ethics Committee chamber buzzed with murmurs as the recording ended. On the central display, the final moments of the Battle of Europa froze on an image of Commander Rise standing over the defeated Krell commander, her bloodied hand holding a combat knife to the alien's throat sack while demanding surrender. High Counselor Vraxen's skin had shifted to a mottled gray-purple that indicated deep discomfort. Throughout the Senate gathering, similar expressions of shock registered across various species features. The Zith's antennae flattened against their carapaces, the Tellarate's tusks clicked in agitation, and the Meveran's translucent skin pulsed with accelerated heartbeats. "This recording has been distributed to 17 Senate worlds already," announced the Ethics Committee chairperson, an ancient Zith named Exect, whose compound eyes reflected the frozen image. The public response has been overwhelming. Ambassador Thalon presented data on a secondary display. Requests for trade restrictions against Earth have increased 800%. The Penteri Conclave has formally demanded a security cordon around the Sol system. Reyes, seated at a small table facing the committee, maintained her composure despite the hostile atmosphere. She wore her dress uniform, the left sleeve still bearing faint bloodstains that military protocol would normally forbid, but that she had deliberately preserved. "I'm struggling to understand." Vraxen addressed her directly, "why you felt it necessary to broadcast the distress calls of damaged Krell vessels to their companions." "Psychological warfare," Rise answered simply. "It divided their attention and saved human lives." By exploiting their communal empathy response, countered a Meveran delegate. A response evolved specifically for social cohesion, not to be weaponized. "With respect," Rise replied, her tone suggesting minimal respect indeed. "The Krell were butchering civilians. We used every advantage available." Sek's mandibles clicked sharply. "Let us discuss your boarding action. Senate military doctrine explicitly prohibits targeting life support and gravity systems." The display shifted to footage from a Marine's helmet camera, showing humans moving through Krell corridors in near-zero gravity after selectively disabling systems by section. "The Krell evolved on a high-gravity world," Rise explained. "In microgravity, their natural armor becomes a disadvantage. Their movements grow sluggish, disoriented. You deliberately induced physical distress in sentient beings," Thalon stated, his skin flushing deep indigo with moral outrage. "I captured their flagship with minimal casualties on both sides," Rise countered, leaning forward. "Had we followed Senate protocols, we'd still be trading long-range fire, and hundreds more would be dead." The committee fell uncomfortably silent. The fundamental disconnect was becoming clear. What the Senate viewed as atrocities, humans saw as necessary adaptations to ensure survival. A Tellarite delegate broke the silence. "What troubles us most, Commander, is that your vessels continued fighting effectively even after losing central communication. Our tactical simulations indicate this should be impossible without." "Without what?" Rise prompted when the alien hesitated. "Without prior planning for disobedience," the Tellarite finished. "Each of your ship captains made independent decisions that somehow aligned with your overall strategy, despite having no way to coordinate." Reyes allowed herself a thin smile. "We call it commander's intent. Every officer is trained not just to follow orders, but to understand the objective behind them. If communications fail, they pursue that objective by whatever means necessary." The implications visibly disturbed the committee. A species whose warriors could operate independently yet cohesively represented something the Senate had not encountered in millennia. Outside the chamber, news arrived from human space that complicated matters further. In response to the Europa victory, Earth's governments had authorized an emergency shipbuilding program. Dozens of new vessels under construction, designed specifically based on weaknesses identified in Krell technology. Meanwhile, Intelligence reports indicated the Krell Empire had taken formal notice of humanity. Their Imperial Council had designated Earth a potential Tier 1 military threat, a classification previously reserved for only 2 other species in known space. "You've made an enemy of one of the galaxy's oldest military powers," Vraxin informed Reyes gravely. "They made themselves our enemy when they attacked our colonies," she responded. X's compound eyes focused on Reyes with unsettling intensity. "What concerns this committee, Commander, is not that you defended your people, but how you defended them. The methods you employed have not been seen in this galaxy since the Dark Wars 5,000 years ago." The committee chamber fell silent again as the display shifted to show the Senate's formal response taking shape. Resolution 7429B was already gathering co-sponsors from across Senate space. "You should prepare yourself, Commander," Vraxin advised quietly. "The Senate moves slowly, but when it finally acts..." He left the sentence unfinished. Rey stood, straightening her uniform. "With respect, High Counselor, while the Senate deliberates, humanity will continue to defend itself, by whatever means necessary." The United Earth Security Council chamber in Geneva fell silent as the terms of Resolution 7429B appeared on the central display. Representatives from every major nation studied the document with expressions ranging from disbelief to barely contained fury. "They want us to dismantle our fleet," General Santos of the Pan-American Alliance finally stated, breaking the stunned silence. "The same fleet that just saved thousands of our people." Admiral Kazuto nodded grimly. "Not just dismantle. They want oversight of everything from orbital satellites to mining equipment modifications, anything that could conceivably be used as a weapon." Director Harrow of Asteroid Mining Incorporated, invited as a civilian observer, studied the document through narrowed eyes. The weathered executive had spent 30 years building the largest commercial space operation in human history. "These advisors they want to place on our ships, they're not advisors, they're wardens." Commander Reyes, fresh from her Senate hearing and still wearing her formal uniform, stood at the back of the chamber. The council had not invited her to speak, merely to observe, a political compromise between those who viewed her as a hero and others who blamed her for provoking the Senate's harsh response. The Chinese representative raised a hand. "What happens if we refuse these terms?" The question hung in the air before Earth's chief diplomat, Ambassador Rivera, responded. "The Senate controls access to the hyperspace node network. Without it, we're confined to sublight travel within our own system. They would effectively quarantine Earth. So it's economic strangulation," Harrow concluded. Among other things, Rivera brought up additional documents. "They've already begun talking to the Farron Republic and Proxima colonies about restricting trade with Earth. Our off-world settlements would be isolated." Reyes watched the debate escalate, arguments flying back and forth between military leaders demanding sovereignty and economic advisors warning of catastrophic isolation. Finally, unable to remain silent any longer, she stepped forward. "May I speak?" she asked formally. The council chair hesitated before nodding. "Briefly, Commander, your actions have already spoken rather loudly." "The Senate isn't afraid of our weapons," Reyes began, her voice steady. "They're afraid of how we think. Their species evolved toward social consensus, rigid hierarchy, and predictable behavior patterns. Humanity didn't." She gestured to the decree displayed before them. "This document isn't about preventing war. It's about making sure if war comes, we fight it on their terms, by their rules. Rules that would ensure our defeat," General Santos added. "Precisely." Reyes nodded. "The Krell attacked us expecting a predictable response. They didn't get one. That terrifies the Senate more than our weapons ever could." Director Harrow leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. "And what exactly would you suggest, Commander?" Open defiance. "No," Reyes replied carefully. "I suggest apparent compliance." The room quieted as she continued. "We accept their terms publicly. We decommission our warships, allow their advisors aboard our vessels, Follow the regulations to the letter. Surrender, Admiral Kazuto asked incredulously. Adaptation, Rise corrected. Every mining vessel we build from now on includes reinforced hulls, oversized power systems, modular equipment bays. Not weapons, just capabilities that could become weapons if needed. Director Harrow's expression shifted to one of calculated assessment. My company has 50 new excavation ships in production. With some creative engineering modifications, they could serve dual purposes. The Senate will suspect, warned Ambassador Rivera. Let them suspect, Rise responded. Suspicion isn't proof, and their own ethical codes prevent them from acting without proof. A murmur of consideration spread through the chamber as council members digested the proposal. It wasn't ideal, but it offered a way forward that preserved some measure of autonomy. Commander Reyes, the council chair, addressed her formally. Given your recent censure by the Senate, your official military status is currently complicated. Perhaps you might consider a position in the private sector during this transition. Director Harrow smiled thinly. Asteroid Mining Incorporated has an immediate opening for a head of security operations. Someone with experience in unconventional problem-solving would be ideal. Later that evening, as the council prepared its official response to the Senate decree, Rise stood on the observation deck of the Geneva complex, watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. The Dauntless and 3 other warships hung in low orbit, visible as moving points of light, soon to be decommissioned under Senate oversight. Admiral Kazuto joined her at the viewport. They'll be watching you, you know. The Senate will monitor every move you make in the private sector. Let them watch, Rise replied quietly. Humans have always been good at hiding in plain sight. The Krell won't forget what happened at Europa. Kazuto warned. Their empire has never suffered such a defeat from a technologically inferior species. They'll be looking for revenge. Rise nodded, her eyes fixed on the stars where unseen borders now constrained humanity's movements. Then we'll need to be ready when they come, one way or another. The observation deck of mining vessel Ami Prospector offered a perfect view of the approaching Voth scout ships. 3 sleek, obsidian-hulled vessels glided through the asteroid field with predatory grace, their sensor arrays sweeping methodically across the human mining operation. Rise watched them through narrowed eyes, sipping from a mug of coffee grown on Mars. After 6 months as head of security for Asteroid Mining Incorporated, she had adapted to civilian life with surprising ease, at least on the surface. They're getting bolder, noted Chang, her second-in-command and former naval intelligence officer. This is the 3rd incursion this month, and each time they come closer to our primary extraction sites, Rise added. She tapped her comm unit. Status on Senate Observer Lethics. Still confined to quarters with that convenient stomach virus, Chang replied with the ghost of a smile. Medical expects his recovery will take another 12 hours, minimum. How unfortunate for him to miss another Voth sighting. Rise set down her coffee mug. Alert status, quiet thunder. Full deniability protocols. Throughout the mining vessel, carefully selected crew members, many former military, received the code phrase through discreet channels. Nothing appeared on official communications that Senate monitors might access later. We have a slight problem, Chang reported, checking the secure tablet. The Voth have changed course. They're headed directly for Research Outpost Gamma. The station has only minimal defensive capabilities. Reyes's expression hardened. And 37 civilians, including 12 children from the education program. On the station's manifest, one name stood out, Dr. Eliza Chen, now recovered from her ordeal on Europa, and leading a xenobiology research team studying extinct Martian microfossils. Options? Rise asked. We could divert the maintenance shuttle. It's equipped with the new gravitational stabilizers we've been testing. Chang used the officially approved terminology for what were essentially stealth-capable propulsion systems. Too slow. Rise made a decision. Prepare the Prospector for emergency maneuvers. We need to put ourselves between those Voth and the research station. That's pushing our cover story to the breaking point, Chang warned. Mining vessels don't intercept alien ships. This one does. Rise activated her command channel. Engineering, prepare for emergency thrust. Navigation, plot intercept course with the Voth vessels approaching Gamma Station. The massive mining vessel's engines hummed to life, its bulky frame belying the surprisingly agile propulsion systems hidden within its industrial exterior. On paper, the Prospector was a standard extraction vessel. In reality, it contained enough repurposed technology to challenge anything short of a dedicated warship. Voth ships have noticed our course change, reported the sensor operator. They're adjusting to intercept. Perfect, Rise murmured. That's away from the research station. They're scanning us, Chang warned. Very thorough scans. Let them look. Rise smiled thinly. All they'll see is mining equipment. The Prospector continued its lumbering approach toward the Voth vessels. On the surface, it appeared to be exactly what its registry claimed. A civilian mining ship with standard industrial equipment. Only someone looking extremely closely might question why a mining vessel needed quadruple redundant power systems, or why its hull plating contained layers of unusual materials. Voth Commander is hailing us, reported communications. Put them through. Rise straightened her civilian uniform jacket. No insignia, no rank, nothing to suggest military background. The view screen activated to show a Voth Commander, a massive cyborg being with both organic and mechanical components integrated into a reptilian frame. Its voice emerged as a synthesized rumble. Human vessel, you are interfering with Voth collective operations. Alter course immediately. Rise adopted a look of concerned confusion. This is Director Rise of Asteroid Mining Incorporated. You're in a registered human mining sector. Our sensors indicate you're approaching a civilian research outpost. We were concerned there might be a navigation error. There is no error, the Voth Commander replied coldly. That research outpost occupies space claimed by the Voth Collective. Claimed when? Rise asked innocently. Our record shows Senate registration of that outpost 3 years ago. Perhaps there's a diplomatic misunderstanding. We should refer to Senate authorities. The mention of the Senate caused visible hesitation in the Voth Commander. This confirmed Rise's suspicion. The Voth were testing boundaries, but weren't ready for official Senate involvement. In the meantime, Rise continued pleasantly. We were about to conduct routine mining operations in this immediate area. Our equipment generates quite substantial electromagnetic fields and gravitational disruptions. For safety reasons, we recommend all vessels maintain a distance of at least 500,000 kilometers. You threaten Voth vessels. The commander's mechanical eyes narrowed. Not at all. Rise replied with practiced innocence. Simply a safety precaution. Industrial accidents can be so unpredictable. She nodded to Chang, who activated a sequence on his control panel. The Prospector's forward processing arrays began to glow as they powered up, electromagnetic readings spiking dramatically. Our equipment appears to be experiencing some unusual fluctuations, Rise reported with exaggerated concern. Most unusual. We recommend immediate distance for your vessel's safety while we investigate this malfunction. The Voth Commander studied her for a long moment, clearly calculating the risk versus reward of challenging this ambiguous threat. Finally, it made a gesture to someone off-screen. We will postpone our survey of this region, it stated flatly. But the Voth Collective maintains its claim. We will return. We look forward to resolving this through proper diplomatic channels, Rise replied cordially. As the Voth vessels turned away, Chang let out a breath he'd been holding. That was closer than I'd like. They'll be back, Rise acknowledged, and with better intelligence about our capabilities. The Senate observer will file a report about our course deviation. Let him, Rise replied. All he can prove is that we moved to protect a research station, completely legitimate for a security director concerned about civilian safety. That evening, as the Prospector resumed its actual mining operations, Rise received a private communication from High Counselor Vraxen. The Alturian appeared troubled, his skin shifting through patterns indicating internal conflict. "Commander, forgive me. Director Reyes," he began formally. "The Senate has received 7 reports of unusual industrial accidents involving human mining vessels and Voth ships in the past month." "Space is dangerous, High Counselor," Reyes replied evenly. "Equipment malfunctions happen frequently in asteroid fields." Indeed, Vraxen's skin rippled with what might have been the Alturian equivalent of skepticism. "These malfunctions seem remarkably targeted. Perhaps the Voth should avoid approaching human operations so closely," Reyes suggested. "For safety reasons." The unspoken understanding hung between them. Vraxen suspected exactly what was happening, but could prove nothing. Without evidence, the Senate's hands were tied by their own laws. "The Voth ambassador has lodged a formal complaint," Vraxen continued. "He specifically mentioned your name, Director." "Did he?" Reyes allowed herself a small smile. "I'm flattered to be noticed by such an important figure." Vraxen's colors shifted again, this time to a pattern Reyes hadn't seen before. "Be careful, Director. Not all in the Senate share my nuanced view of human ingenuity." The communication ended, leaving Reyes to contemplate the changing dynamics. The Voth were testing more than just human defenses. They were testing the Senate itself, probing for weaknesses in the galactic order. And somewhere in that emerging conflict lay opportunity for humanity to regain its freedom to defend itself openly. The Senate chamber's perfect acoustics carried every word of the Tellarate representative's impassioned speech to the assembled delegates. Ambassador Cora, her tusks adorned with the ceremonial bands of her clan, stood firmly at the central podium. "For 2,000 years, we have fought according to the same protocols, employed the same tactics, and maintained the same ethical boundaries in warfare," she declared, her powerful voice resonating through the chamber. "And for 2,000 years, we have faced opponents who did the same." She gestured to the statistical displays hovering above the assembly, showing the recent Voth advances through 3 previously secure Senate systems. "The Voth do not fight as we do," Cora continued. "They have studied our patterns and developed countermeasures specifically designed to exploit our predictability. Our peacekeeping forces arrive in standard formation, deploy standardized defensive screens, and target enemy weapon systems in precisely the order our tactical manuals prescribe." High Counselor Vraxen watched from his elevated position, his skin shifting through subtle color patterns as he assessed the changing political landscape. The traditional Alturian-led coalition supporting Resolution 7429B was showing signs of fracture. "Perhaps," Cora suggested, her tone deliberately measured, "it is time we reconsider our position on human military restrictions. Not because we approve of their methods, but because we require their perspective." Murmurs spread through the chamber as various species communicated their reactions through their own biological expressions. Fluttering membranes, shifting colors, pheromone releases. Not all were supportive. "The humans have demonstrated an ability to think beyond established patterns," Cora pressed on. "Their approach to the Krell incursion, while distasteful to our sensibilities, revealed tactical innovations unseen in this chamber for millennia." Ambassador Thalen rose from the Alturian delegation, his skin flushed with the deep blue of formal opposition. "We cannot seriously be considering embracing primitive warfare techniques. The restrictions on humanity were implemented precisely because their approach threatens the ethical foundation of galactic civilization." "And yet," countered Cora, "the Voth now employ adaptations of those same human techniques against us, while we remain bound by self-imposed limitations." The debate escalated as more representatives joined in, the chamber dividing between traditionalists insisting on maintaining established Senate warfare protocols and a growing pragmatic faction arguing for adaptation. In a secure observation chamber adjacent to the main floor, Reyes watched the proceedings alongside Director Harrow. They had been summoned to the Senate station urgently, but not told why until their arrival. "Interesting," Harrow murmured. "The balance is shifting." "Not fast enough," Reyes replied, her attention on a secondary display showing reports from the front lines. 3 Senate outposts had fallen in the past week alone. The Voth were employing decentralized command structures and targeting support systems rather than weapons, distinctly human approaches to warfare. The chamber door slid open to admit a Senate aide, who bowed respectfully. High Counselor Vraxen requests your presence in his private chambers immediately. They followed the aide through the ornate corridors of the Senate station. Unlike the utilitarian designs of human vessels, every surface here featured delicate artistry accumulated over thousands of years of galactic civilization. It was beautiful, Reyes thought, but perhaps revealing of a culture too accustomed to stability and predictability. Vraxen's private office offered a stunning view of nearby planets through a transparent dome. The High Counselor himself stood with his back to the door, his skin rippling with troubled color patterns. Director Reyes, he acknowledged without turning, I find myself in an unprecedented position. How can we help, High Counselor? Reyes asked, maintaining the formality their public relationship required. Vraxen turned, his 4 arms clasped in what Reyes had learned was a gesture of internal conflict. The Senate faces its greatest military challenge in 2 millennia. The Voth have penetrated our inner security perimeter. 3 outposts lost, thousands of citizens captured or killed. I've seen the reports, Reyes replied carefully. What you haven't seen, Vraxen continued, activating a secure holographic display, is this. The display showed a massive Voth battle fleet assembling near the Proxima Centauri system, directly on the approach vector to Earth. They're not just targeting Senate worlds, Harrow observed. They're coming for us. Precisely. Vraxen's skin shifted to a resolved indigo, which presents both crisis and opportunity. He activated a communication channel, revealing a draft amendment to Resolution 7429B displayed in formal Senate legal language. A temporary exemption, he explained, allowing human vessels to operate without restrictions in defense of Proxima Centauri, under the classification of emergency security protocols. Not a full repeal, but a beginning. Reyes studied the document carefully. And what does the Senate want in return? Human tactical advisors, Vraxen replied simply, assigned to Senate peacekeeping vessels. We need to understand how you think. The unsaid truth hung in the air between them. The mighty Senate, with its thousands of years of civilization and technological superiority, needed human help. That's a significant policy shift, Reyes noted. I assume not all Senate factions support this. It will face opposition, Vraxen acknowledged. But recent events have made certain realities difficult to ignore. Harrow glanced at Reyes, the question clear in his eyes. She gave a slight nod before turning back to Vraxen. I'll need temporary reinstatement of my military commission, she said, and operational control of human defensive forces. That can be arranged, Vraxen replied. But the Senate will require assurances regarding ethical boundaries. High Counselor, Reyes met his gaze directly. When the Voth fleet reaches Proxima Centauri, ethical debates will become academic. They're coming to destroy, not negotiate. Vraxen's skin darkened to deep indigo, the color of decision. Then we must ensure they find something they did not expect. The command deck of the Senate flagship Eternal Vigilance hummed with unprecedented activity. For the first time in its 1,000-year history, non-Senate officers moved freely among its control stations. Commander Reyes, temporarily reinstated to her military rank, stood at the central strategic display alongside High Counselor Vraxen and Admiral Colverin of the Senate Peacekeeping Fleet. The Voth battle group will emerge from hyperspace in approximately 12 minutes, reported a Tellarite sensor officer. Standard emergence pattern indicated. They're expecting us to meet them with the traditional defensive screen, Reyes noted, studying the predicted formation. 3 lines of capital ships, support vessels in the rear quadrant, fighters deployed in symmetrical patterns. Admiral Colverin, a veteran of 2 centuries of Senate peacekeeping operations, nodded gravely. That is indeed our standard response to a force of this configuration. which is exactly why we won't do it, Rise replied, making the sweeping gesture across the display. The holographic ships rearranged into a formation that made several Senate officers visibly uncomfortable with its apparent disorder. This violates all established tactical doctrine, protested a Zith commander. That's the point, Rise explained patiently. The Voth has studied your tactical doctrine for decades. They're prepared for it. What they're not prepared for is this. She highlighted specific elements of the new formation. Human vessels positioned at seemingly random intervals, Senate ships clustered in asymmetrical groups, fighter squadrons held in reserve rather than deployed immediately. Position uncertainty creates decision paralysis, she continued. When faced with a formation they don't recognize, the Voth will hesitate while attempting to categorize the threat. That hesitation gives us our first advantage. Vraxen watched with careful attention, his skin shifting through thoughtful patterns. And the second advantage? Psychology, Rise replied. The Voth, like the Krell, evolved from pack predators. Their natural instinct is to focus on the most obvious threat while ignoring seemingly weaker elements. By placing our heaviest firepower in apparently vulnerable positions, we invite them to commit to a primary attack vector. Admiral Culverin's expression revealed growing understanding. And when they commit, we close the trap, Rise finished. Human vessels will execute high-G maneuvers to cut off their retreat while your Senate warships unleash coordinated fire from positions they won't expect. Throughout the command deck, Senate officers exchanged uncertain glances. The strategy violated centuries of established protocol, but offered something they desperately needed: unpredictability. As the Voth fleet emerged from hyperspace exactly on schedule, the hybrid human Senate force waited in its unconventional formation. The massive black ships of the Voth Collective, bristling with weapons adapted from various species across the galaxy, moved with predatory grace into attack position. They're scanning us, reported the sensor officer. Multiple sweeps, full spectrum. Let them look, Rise said calmly. They'll see exactly what we want them to see. The Voth commander opened communications, its cyborg features displaying calculated confidence. Senate vessels, you have intruded upon space claimed by the Voth Collective. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. Admiral Culverin began the formal response protocol, but Rise placed a hand on his arm, silently requesting permission to handle the exchange differently. After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. This is Commander Rise of the Joint Human Senate Task Force. She addressed the Voth directly. We understand you're holding Senate citizens captive at Outpost Gamma 9. Return them immediately, and we'll discuss territorial boundaries. The Voth commander's mechanical eyes narrowed at this deviation from expected Senate diplomatic procedure. Humans have no standing in this conflict. The Senate restrictions are clear. Those restrictions have been temporarily lifted, Rise informed him with a thin smile. Perhaps your intelligence is outdated. This unexpected development caused visible confusion among the Voth command staff visible in the background of the transmission. Rise had introduced uncertainty, exactly as planned. You have 30 seconds to begin withdrawal. The Voth commander recovered, terminating communications. They're moving their heavy cruisers into primary attack formation, reported the tactical officer, targeting our apparent weak points, just as predicted. Rise nodded to Admiral Culverin. The trap is set. Spring it, the Admiral ordered, embracing the human idiom with unexpected enthusiasm. What followed astonished even the Senate veterans. Human vessels executed maneuvers at acceleration levels that would incapacitate most Senate species, slicing through Voth formations at precisely calculated vectors. Senate warships, guided by human tactical advisors, broke from traditional targeting priorities to strike Voth support systems rather than weapons. The Voth, faced with an approach they hadn't encountered before, struggled to adapt their responses. Their centralized command structure, accustomed to facing predictable Senate tactics, faltered against the hybrid strategy. As the battle reached its climax, Rise led the boarding operation against the Voth command ship. Unlike the brutal efficiency of her assault on the Krell flagship, this operation demonstrated a refined approach. Precisely targeted breaching points, non-lethal suppression systems, and careful coordination with Senate peacekeepers to secure hostages without unnecessary casualties. Standing on the captured bridge of the Voth flagship 90 minutes later, Reyes accepted the formal surrender of the Voth commander. Behind her stood representatives of both human and Senate forces, a visual testament to what their combined approach had accomplished. "You fight without honor," the Voth commander hissed as its crew were secured. "We fight to win while preserving life where possible," Reyes corrected. "There's honor in that, just not the kind you recognize." 3 days later, in the Grand Senate chamber, Resolution 8651, formally replaced the restrictive 7429B. The Cooperative Defense Accord recognized humanity's right to maintain its military while establishing ethical guidelines that both humans and Senate species would follow in future conflicts. At the signing ceremony, High Counselor Vraxen addressed the assembled representatives with newfound insight. "We feared humans because they reminded us of our own ancient past before we developed our civilized approaches to conflict," he explained, his skin glowing with the blue-green of philosophical reflection. "We forgot that adaptation, even uncomfortable adaptation, is necessary for survival. The galaxy grows more dangerous, not less. What we needed was not to restrict human innovation, but to channel it." The ceremony concluded with the announcement of the new Rapid Response Division of the Senate Peacekeeping Force, a joint initiative where human officers would train alongside Senate species in both conventional and adaptive tactics. Commander Reyes, appointed as its first director, stood at the edge of the massive Senate station's observation deck that evening, watching distant stars. High Counselor Vraxen joined her in contemplative silence. "Not how you expected this to end, I imagine," Vraxen said finally. "No," Reyes admitted. "When I took that mining security job, I thought we'd be fighting against Senate restrictions for decades. And instead we found a middle path." She turned to face the Alturian. "Humans will always adapt to survive, Counselor. It's what we do. But adaptation doesn't have to mean abandoning ethics entirely." "And the Senate," Vraxen replied, "has learned that principles without flexibility become vulnerabilities." Together they watched as a joint patrol of human and Senate vessels departed the station, heading toward the still contested borders of Voth space. The ships moved in formation that was neither purely human nor traditionally Senate, but something new, evolved from both. "The Krell will be watching these developments," Vraxen noted. "Their empire rarely ignored shifts in the balance of power." "Let them watch," Reyes replied with quiet confidence. "Next time, we'll be ready, together." The galaxy would never be the same again. And perhaps, Reyes reflected as she watched the patrol disappear into the distance, that was exactly what both humanity and the Senate had needed all along.